so many people are looking for answers. And the thing I took from like our conversation, your book, is that they're looking for answers, but they refuse to actually look for the questions. Why is that? Why do people refuse to actually look for questions?
Hmm. Well, going back to like the ethos of the book, uh, kind of the core of doing to done is clarity is kind. So clarity is kind for ourselves. And if we get clear with ourselves, we can get clear with those around us, whether family members or team members or, company level stuff. But in order to get clarity, there's something we need to go through, which is the questions. What do we want to get clear about? So, another kind of key underpinning of the book is helping people find some beautiful questions that serve them. Because if you can find some beautiful questions for yourself, they change how you see the world. The questions we ask ourselves are fateful. So like the frame, and the act of curating a beautiful question is an act of courage, because you have to want to turn and face and be in relationship with that question for a period of time. It's like you're dating the question. And you show up and the question asks you the question and you're like, I'm kind of here today, kind of there today, whatever it is. But it's part of a journey. So to be with that question over time will reveal information to you that will help you. And then once that question is no longer serving you, you can go on and pursue the next question, whatever that is. So one of the earliest pieces of wisdom that profoundly impacted me was from a friend who said that a statement is just a poorly worded question. So if in parenting mode, I've been in this mode where I've made statements at my kids and, those land how they land, but they kind of put people on their heels. And versus if you create a beautiful question or ask a question, it opens up space for dialogue and conversation. So I've really found that curating questions and allowed me to curate my curiosity, which just created all kinds of fun because I didn't need to know it all. And I learned that, probably too late in life. I wish I would have learned that lesson earlier where you didn't need to know it all. Just had to have some good questions and follow where they lead.
Mike, do you have some examples of poorly worded questions that are statements that you've seen, whether it's as a parent in yourself or even with like the people that you're coaching, right? Because I'm guessing, especially with the people you're coaching, some like, high octane, high performing, like let's get like some GSD sort of energy. It's how can you give an example of that and how and what is the alternative version of a beautiful question?
Yeah. So probably most recent, I was coaching chief operating officer this week. So here's a person who kind of rose up in the business through the business that they were leading. So they had a lot of competence in what they were doing in the business, and now they're at an executive level. So in this executive level, they have direct reports and people below them. So when a person would come into this individual's office with a problem, he would make statements and give answers. So this is kind of a paradox of people who have risen up through the ranks, and they kind of suffer from their own extreme competence on where they've been. And so in this case, this competence has a cost because you can answer the question, show up and be the hero, divert all that energy um, towards the thing that you're working on, but simultaneously, that big strategic question that you should be working on in your executive role is getting ignored. So that's kind of part one of that. And then part two of that is turning that competence into questions for the people who are bringing the problem or the situation to you, and turning your statements or turning the situation back into a question for them can help them then discover the wisdom that's in them to answer it based on the experiences that they've had and what's available to them. Because in order to gain higher levels of mastery, we have to do it through the do it through the answering of the questions. So, in this example, having a question can be a wonderful delegation slash coaching opportunity for somebody you're coaching in your organization or even coaching a child. Same dynamic. Like, what's the question to be pursued? Like, what showed up? What do you recommend? What do you think will happen? All right, go try it. The world's a good teacher. Come on back and we'll talk about it. We'll ask more questions about the thing. So that's kind of the way it works, and that's kind of the immediate example that's on my mind. Um, I guess like a family example that is on my mind when I ask this is thinking back to my daughter when she was a junior in high school and working on college applications, and I found her sitting on her bed. Social media was vibing at the time with her. Um, she was in AP classes, she was doing college applications, she was clearly overwhelmed. So my choice when I saw the situation was I could walk in the room and I could give a dad lecture. You can do it, you got this, and just like lay on all the platitudes. Or I could say, Hannah, um, if you allow me 15 minutes, I promise not to do a dad lecture. And all I want to do is just ask you a couple questions and then I will leave. And so I walked in a room and then I said, first question, what's on your mind? And let's just write that down. So wrote it down, wrote it down, wrote it down. And then for each of those items that you wrote down, what's one step or one action you can take to move that thing forward? And just write it next to the thing. And you could see the overwhelm kind of disappear and the control, go back to her body where she could see a game that she could win at because of those two simple questions. So instead of making statement, 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 and no opportunity for her to find her own wisdom, I could ask a question and then she found her own wisdom. And not only that, I taught her over time, as you repeat this, how to find the wisdom that's within you, within the context that you're in and the content that's being revealed and how you might have to react to it. So those are, a couple examples of how questions, like if you find the situation, you're looking to make a statement, maybe even practice writing the statement down and then right next to it, you're right, what would the question be? And that could really help people kind of lean into this idea of what's the beautiful question here.
Mike, I find you just said something I thought was really profound is creating the space for your daughter to find her wisdom. And I think sometimes when we think about value creation, is so often is that for like our end customer or client or user, right? Like, so much of this, like, your book, right, is, doing to done is like solving someone's question, right? Like, well, how do I get clarity? But what I like about what you talked about with the question is it seems like that is the new value creation is creating space for people to have wisdom. And I think especially in light of as this AI revolution is moving through and it's actually taking over some of the doing and we are being left with the being aspect of it. And I find that really interesting that in high school, it's about memorizing knowledge, right? So that you have answers, right? We do questions on tests to be able to go like our knowledge, but there's very little curriculum on how to actually create the recipe for a beautiful question. And so when I think about as we are moving towards this beingness, how do you deconstruct the recipe in general? Because I'm sure it's different for everyone, your frame of reference, where you come from, like your personality. But what's the deconstructed recipe of a beautiful question?
Um, I think it's a couple things, like, I'll give you the frame that we use in doing to done. So, questions live at different levels of perspective. So you could have a lower level question, and then you could have a higher level question. So, lower level question, what am I gonna eat for dinner? Higher level question, where am I going in life? And what do I wanna do in life? Um, so so first of all, questions, meet the moment. So if you're working on something and you're struggling at a lower level, usually you have to go up a level and ask the question, like ask a why question. Why am I even doing this? Because I have a role of a dad and I want to be a good role for Hannah and I want to practice teaching her the value of good questions. Well, why is that important to you? Because I want to help the overwhelmed humans focus and find clarity in that's my particular purpose in life. And in my dad role, I just get to express some of that. So these questions we ask, live on this spectrum of lower level of perspective to higher level of perspective. And kind of the art is curating the questions and knowing at which level they live at.
What I'm starting to understand here, though, is that there's lower and higher level, right? So, and it seems to me the being conscious of, I even say, like, what am I going to eat today? And a higher level question is like, okay, if I'm going to eat today, like, what are my macros, right? Even just taking something super simple of eating, right? Well, I'm hungry. What am I going to eat today? Versus being like, hey, I know I need to get like 1 gram of protein per pound, right? Like, so how am I going to like figure build that into like my day's routine? Like, would be like, is that is am I understanding that correctly? Like, that would be a lower level, higher level question.
Yeah, because between what am I going to do in my life and what am I going to eat, there's in the doing to done system there's this thing called roles, and each of the roles you have in your life has a purpose as well. So in your role of managing yourself, one of the things that you're paying attention to is what you're eating, and so that can be something we call a practice. So practices are something that help you go deeper because they're never done, but they help you go deeper over time. They increase your understanding. They put you on a path of mastery. So clearly listening to you, you're on a path of mastery on understanding what you're putting in your body and why. And as you pursue that path of mastery, you're asking yourself, and you've already curated some beautiful questions for yourself. What are the macros? What's the nutrition content? What's the portion size? So on and so forth. And through that practice, it's changing probably the way you're seeing the world. You see your grocery list different. You see the grocery store different. You see your plate different. You see the timing of what you're eating different. So, this beautiful question example that you gave us can be encapsulated in what I call a practice and helps you go deeper and find the deeper questions in what you're pursuing. So taking that idea, you could also bring it over to an entrepreneur role and say, okay, now if I'm in this role, what questions do I need to be asking about my business? And if we double click on that, we can say, what strategic questions do I need to ask? How am I competing in the marketplace? Who's my high value customer? You know, how am I capturing them? So on and so forth. So all these things can be broken down into something that is truly unique to you and help you package the questions and bump into them at a frequency you want to bump into them so that you can march into fresh start territory with more purpose and a vision of where you're going. And with that, you'll say a stronger yes to things, and you'll say a stronger no to things that are coming into your life as you get clear on what you're doing and why. So that's, these questions, it's questions all the way down. So if you look at the Doing to Done book, it's a book of strategically placed questions to help you find your wisdom at these different levels.
Yeah, you know, but I love all of that, especially about the roles, and we're gonna. I have questions about the being in the roles, but I still want to dive a little bit more into the why portion. And I heard someone tell me like in engineering school they teach you the five whys. Like if you ask five whys, you're probably going to get to the root cause of it. Why do you think most people don't either ask the following why? And second is, why do they stop beyond the first why? Is it it's hard to ask why? Is it like ego? Is it like, what? I think of the ostrich burying the head in the sand. But like, why don't people take that next step of the why? And then beyond that, why don't they just continue like elevating that question? Because that's what your why is doing, right? Taking the low level, like my statement, I'm a dad, right? Well, like why is that identity important, right? And as you're going in, but I find that so many people, and I see it in politics all the time. I see it in the identity of like I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, right? Or it's the identity in like in race or gender or sexuality, right? But I find that there's not a next level of why, and it seems like either people do one why and then we stop. But what have you seen in being in this journey of clarity?
Yeah, I think the why question in particular is kind of like similar to any frame that you bump into or framework that you bump into in life. Once you get exposed to it, then you have a choice. Like, is this serving me? Is this not serving me? Have I practiced it? Do I want to practice it? Do I want to develop a little level of competency in this? And if I do so, will it serve me somehow? Will it, you know, bring value back in my life? So I think in general, just like if I could generalize skill adoption or acquisition, the key question is why do I even need this skill? And then how do I develop some mastery in it? And then tangential to that is you've probably heard the four levels of competence, or which are, you know, I don't know what I don't know. Okay, so we aren't even aware of the five questions.
Yep.
I know what I don't know. What's this five questions thing? I know what I know because I've been practicing the five questions. And then I don't know what I know because I've embodied the five questions. So those are all, that's a path of discovery, awareness. Number one, hey, five questions exist. And then how you might use it all the way through to mastery on that particular idea that entered your life. So I think that's like the frame of how I'd answer your question. And then it's in this acquisition. What do we choose to keep? What do we choose to discard? What do we choose to practice? And the invitation I place for a person in the Doing to Done framework, going back to the role clarity map, is for each role, what are the top three things you want to practice to help you master this role or become extremely competent in being a dad, being a CEO, being an entrepreneur, whatever it is. And that limiting it to three kind of goes back to what we're talking about in the green room on the Focus Beat card, is what I call a beautiful constraint. And it kind of forces your thinking into, okay, I know there's a whole universe of things I could do. What are the three I'm going to focus on? And then in identifying the three, are these the three that matter most? And if I practice those, it creates the conditions for good things to show up. So I'm going to wind that all the way back up to the beginning of our conversation here, which started with why the five whys, and somewhere in our lives, it came in. And then somewhere in our lives, we're like, why doesn't everybody ask why a little more often to get a higher level of perspective before we come down and actually work on something? It's a skill to be developed, a skill to be shared, an awareness to be curated, cultivated, and shared like you're doing on this podcast so people can say like, "What's the 5 whys?" And then maybe go out and do some Google research and maybe that's, part of the service we do today.
I'm really geeking out on the question and the importance of the question because when I reflect on my own life, whether it was a argument with my wife or an emotional moment with like my oldest daughter, and or even like my my 4-year-old. I have a 17-year-old, 4-year-old, now a 7.5 week old, and it all stems to the fact is that I did not practice like going to beyond even to like a first why. And I think even in like in my entrepreneurial life where things have maybe not gone in terms of how I projected them, it's because I didn't take it that full length. It's sort of like hitting a golf shot but not actually having a follow through on the swing, right? You're just like, oh, I'm gonna hack at it. If you hack at it, you're probably not going to hit the ball straight. It's probably not going to go very far. And um, I'm really curious, Mike, where did questions become really important to you when you think back through your life? I mean, did you have like, I mean, do you just grow up in a household that was like super curious and like your parents were like, hey, Mike, you got to ask all these questions? I mean, was it through the school of hard knocks, as my dad would like to say?
Yeah. Let me see. Well, certainly growing up, my mom and dad, were teachers, and my dad was a coach. So, there's a lot of that in my blood. But upon reflection, I've actually thought deeply about this question, and, I think where I really learned the lesson of questions and going deeper on the path of mastery happened in my driveway, at my home. And my dad put, basketball we had a single car garage. My dad put a hoop up, and we had a long driveway, and I grew up in upstate New York. So you drive up and down this driveway, it forms some ruts. So it wasn't like a totally flat driveway. It had the crown, the ruts, and then back up. So when I was shooting my hoops, I noticed that, the ball would hit a rut and then bounce this way, this way. But I noticed a spot where if I shot it properly, it would go through the hoop and bounce back to me. And that was the foul line because I was right on the crown. It'd go through the net and come right back to me. So it was in that spot where I started exploring, well, how can I be more consistent with this shot? And then starting breaking down the foul shots and all its different components. What do my legs look like? What do my feet look like? What's my bounce? What's my follow through? How does it feel on my fingertips? What's the rotation look like? Which finger did it go off of? So I started pursuing the idea of questions. And then this also revealed to me the practice of the practice and the practice of mastery because at that foul line and because of those ruts in the road and how I had to practice, I became one of the best foul shooters at my high school and on my high school team. But the big lesson was not the foul shots. It was one shot at a time can teach you so much. So if I go back to the story with Hannah, just write the one thing on your mind. And then the next act of mastery is what's the one next action you need to do to move that thing forward. So so everything I see in life is like, let's just take a shot. Okay, let's break it down. What's the one next action I need to take to start the domino effect of cascading events so I can either, do this practice or if I'm working on a project, get to that finish line. But it starts with one, either one shot or understanding that the nuance of the shot and which direction to take it based on the context that you're in. Like, if I were shooting foul shots and the wind was blowing, I'd have to, like, move an inch over, you know? So I think that honestly is the earliest place where I started to really internalize in myself that I have agency, that I can ask myself these questions. These questions have consequences. How do I use this? And then it became my metaphor for other things in life. Hey, if I can do that foul shot, then I can apply for this job. If I can do that foul shot, I can learn how to blog. If I can do that foul shot, I can learn how to be an executive. So it's all breaking it down into the practice of the practice. So that is the roots way back.
What I love about it is that it's not like this, you know what, I was struck by lightning and somehow I'm just naturally better at like asking questions, is that it's literally just taking something that is so simple and it's free. It's 100% free to have to stop and create the time and space for you to go, you know, what worked. And I'm really struck by, Atomic Habit, James Clear, right? Or yep, you talk about 1%, but what I'm almost taking what you're talking about, you're the 0.01. Like the thing that doesn't, it's not just what's the one thing you can do next. It's literally what is the next thing you can do in like that thought, in that thing that's important to me, that role. And it's this that one shot. I mean, my guess is you didn't just become literally within 10 shots the best foul shooter. My guess is that you were the best 10,000 overnight shot success, right?
Yeah, and, um, I think you find that in all the overnight successes. There's no such thing, right? Maybe the lottery winner or something, but even they had to purchase a lot of tickets. Um, yeah, so what I learned, from that process and then in the business world of coaching, thousands of people is sometimes we make it overcomplicated. And the minimum viable product in doing to done, you don't have to read the book. I'll just lay it out here, is what is the one next action you need to do to move something forward? Not the 5, not the 50 that are on your mind, you know, one. Can you name it? Can you write it down? And then bonus points if you write, what's the finish line look like? That's the done statement. So that's the whole name of the book, doing to done. And if you can write those 2 sentences, that is the foundation for everything, because this captures the agreements you've made with yourself, the agreements you've made with others, the open loops that you need to close, and the inventory that you need to review on a periodic basis to see if you're making progress. And going back to the idea of roles, we can group those by roles so you can ask the question and answer it. Do I feel appropriately engaged with my life? Like, is one role getting too much energy? Like, if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, sometimes the business gets a lot of attention at the cost of, maybe personal time, family time, school events, that kind of stuff. So when you answer that question, do I feel appropriately engaged with my life? You might do some rebalancing. Or for a period of time, if you're going into a very busy period in work or something, you might be mindfully unbalanced for a period of time. But at least you can communicate to the rest of the important people in your life to say, it's going to be unbalanced for a little bit. I know it. I'm calling it out. Let's work together as a team to manage it. And then let's get back to, normalcy after this storm has passed or whatever it is. So, going back to the top, clarity is kind. So as we've kind of covered so far, it's like clear at what level?
So what do you tell people who do that? Okay, like, let's just go back to something that I think a lot of people spend a lot of time in. I'd like to lose weight, right? There's the my health role, right? And that has multiple different roles that impacts. And they go, what is the next one thing? I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. If you ask them the following, why? Like, why? Because it's before my kids get up. I know that I'm guaranteed to, to like have the time and space to be able to do it. What happens? And and the end in mind is like, here's my visual board. Like, here's what I think will happen. What does it tell you about the clarity if literally people don't do that next thing of actually doing it? Like, what does that tell you? Like, they don't wake up at 5. Is it in terms of it's too drastic of a move, or is it they don't have enough clarity? Because I'm just using it as an example, but I'm thinking about, I love your framework, but when you look at New Year's resolutions, I mean, probably 98% of them don't make it to Valentine's Day.
Yeah. So in this particular example, in this genre of example, I think usually people frame it too big, too ambiguous. So my guidance to a person working through a project like that would be let's create a game that you can win. And on that journey, let's say they're starting from, man, I've been out of working out forever and I want to try to get it back in as a practice. So let me quickly go through the role clarity map from the bottom up. So it's action, projects, practices, vision, and purpose. So you have to answer all those things in a role. So higher level perspective, what's my purpose? What's my vision of super duper wild success in this role? What are the practices I need to do? What are the projects I need to do? And then what's the one next action I need to take to move this thing forward today? So in this example, what I might offer up is let's turn this thing into a project that has a very discrete ending. And on this kind of project, we're going from 0 to 1, the first one. So I framed the first one as 0 to 1. So what's the project I need to do to get up and do workout X? Let's call it, maybe they're on a goal for a 5K run or something. Now, the one next action might actually not be waking up the next morning. The one next action might be, going out and buying yourself a pair of shoes. And then you do that. And then the next action after that could be placing the shoes in front of the door and then seeing if your feet slip into them, and your goal is to go out and just stand there for 5 minutes. Whatever it is you can do to make it smaller, smaller, smaller so you can win. But eventually you start taking some steps and you get to whatever your criteria was for one. Now I'm like, cool. Let's celebrate that win. That's a small win on your journey to creating a practice of being a runner in this example. Then I might have them create a second project, which is 2 to 10. So let's get you on this journey to your 10th one. 10 arrives, maybe 11 to 20. And they can pursue that until they feel like, I think this has earned a place in my schedule and in my nervous system that it's now a practice. Then I would take that project and move it up into the practice category, that I do this practice at the frequency I need to do it to keep an agreement with myself that I'm doing this thing. And you can do the practices, and then the practices create the conditions for the outcomes to show up. You can't do an outcome, you can't lose 10 pounds, right? You have to do the practices, combining, your meal prepping practice and what you're putting in your mouth, plus your movement practices, that, that creates the conditions for this other thing that maybe it'll show up. Maybe I'll lose 10 pounds, or maybe you'll keep 10 pounds, but you'll lose 10 pounds of fat and gain 10 pounds of lean body mass. So, how you measure it is another thing to look at. But that's really, the essence of what I do is I help people projectize these notions that they have, these ambiguous situations, like, what do you really wanna do? How are you gonna give yourself a win? Let's define that. What's done look like? And then, okay, what is the real one next action? If this is the only thing in your world to work on right now, and I said action, and I watch you, the hero, do the thing, what would I see you do? You'd either be buying something, drafting something, organizing something, nailing something on the wall, whatever it is. That's the first thing that the superhero does in the scene is the first next action.
I just had the awareness that there's a statement, I can't remember who you attribute this to, but when they're talking about luck, that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. You just gave the framework of what preparation is and how to do that again and again and again.
Yes. And like if you have the setup in doing to done is role, project, action largely. And then as that fills out across your whole life and you see everything and everything has one next action, you increase your surface area of possibility and probability.
Mm.
So if you take an action, then your luck increases. If you don't take an action, you're still in the 0 territory, but you have to ping the universe, and then it'll provide information back and, increase your chance to be lucky. You're creating the conditions. It's almost like a math formula. It's almost a probability calculation that if I know and I train my brain to see what I want to see as opportunity, then I will see the opportunity. But seeing opportunity doesn't come for free. It's something that needs to be written down, reviewed, pulled down daily, and you're cultivating your mind to see the opportunities that you want to see.
When you just said that, I literally just was thinking that getting to what it is you want and where you want to go is so simple that it is incredibly profound.
It is. So like you have these. This is the clarity card, the focus beat. And on the focus beat, I have meeting with Ben. So that is one of my one next actions today in doing this podcast. Why do I want to do this podcast? Because I want to, A, I love collaborating with people like you. B, get any pieces of words of wisdom out in the universe so they can help another person. And that really fulfills, my role as a human being to um, channel energy towards positive outcomes so that people can suffer less and experience more joy. So this podcast is part of that purpose. And how do you express that purpose? Well, go to this meeting with Ben, have this conversation, ping the universe, and then see see what the response is going to be.
Yeah, well, I can tell you the audience is going to love this. Which brings me to like the next portion of this, the next action, right? It can feel like there's a lot of doing. And I think that there's this misguided thing of just an action doesn't necessarily mean that always doing, but there's this level of doing versus being. And I think that there's a big difference between those two. And I'm curious, how do you define doing and being and the balance of that? And you have people like Alex Hormozy, for example, right? Who's like, hey, the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, you should be doing and you should be productive. And, we are machines and like we need to like do this. And so I'm curious, how do you define doing and being? And what's the balance between those two?
So doing has two flavors: the art of doing something and the art of like doing nothing. So in the art of doing something, like I'll give you the answer within the doing to done framework. You can do an action associated with a project. You can do an action associated with a project, or you can do a single action that doesn't necessarily need to be tied to any of those things. So that's number one. And then on the non doing side, you can create empty space to do nothing. You can create empty space to do anything. And then you can create space to welcome unexpected surprises. So these are like the 6 spaces that we work in. And if you were to look at my focus beat card that I just showed you, not every day has doing at the bottom. So just to remind people what this is, like at the top we have projects that you can do and then the next actions that you need to do to move those project forwards. Sometimes up here, I'll just write a role name and it's Saturday. And I don't need to do, I just need to be a dad today. And that brings me into dad mode. I don't know what the doing is going to look like. I'm just going to show up in this context and be a dad and live into my vision for being a dad today. Maybe it's 2 roles, dad and husband. Today is dad and husband day. So I'm looking for the opportunities to be a dad and a husband today. No big to-do list, just a big to-serve list. Like, how can I serve this moment the best way that I can? So that allows me to hold the structure of the vision and purpose that I have for my life without being encumbered by having to name it to do an action and have it on my list and look at my list and all that kind of stuff. You can simply hold the day for a role and say, I just want to be, hey, I'm going to hang out with my parents. I want to be the best son I can be today. So, so that kind of wraps back to sometimes doing with structure is good. It's your inventory of the agreements that you've made with yourself and others. And you have that so that sometimes you can do nothing guilt free, or you can do anything guilt free and let serendipity, the joy of serendipity, run into your life. And then also, get the unexpected surprise. Hey, your child needs to be picked up from school and handle that. And then go back, renegotiate some stuff you need to renegotiate so you can handle that moment. So those are the 2 main sides of doing.
That really like strikes me. And I really loved when you said like, "Hey, I just put up here dad, husband, maybe these 2 roles. Like that is all I need to create space for." And I love that you followed it with not what can I do, but how can I serve? And that I think that everyone is under this elusive end in mind of being present. And so much of being present, it's like they have to be like they have to create like all these just like environments. And I felt like what you just created was if you have clarity of what that role is and what you want, what winning looks like for that, right? And what are the different actions you take and you're practicing. But you literally just said, today I'm going to be dad and I'm going to look at how I can serve as being a dad. Like that is your energy, that's your focus, that's what you're trying energy you're putting into the world on that Saturday.
And that's like these roles, they are the mini superheroes that make up the whole you. So today I'm going to put on my dad superhero hat and cape and live into that role because the context that I'm in is the diorama of dad world, husband world. And what's needed, what does the superhero need to do in this context today? Not what they wish were showing up, but what is actually showing up today that you can share or just be in that moment. And sometimes being doesn't mean serving or maybe it is serving, but it's I think being is a form of serving. And I think sometimes when we're in dialogue in a role and if we don't have an answer, sometimes the best thing we can do is just sit in silence and be without the answer and not feel like we have to have an answer at that moment in time, because over time, the answer may come to us so we can circle back to things. That's kind of one thing I learned along the way. I don't know if we talked about this in the green room or in the call, but like if we're having a conversation with our spouse and it's like, one of those harder conversations and like the right words are just not coming. And I used to try to force a word. And so I've learned that instead of forcing a word, I just say, I don't know. And then in my mind's eye, I'm just like creating this bubble of love to kind of like be surround us in the unknowing so that maybe some knowing can come in at some point in time. But we don't need to force it in the moment. We've got time sometimes to just create space. So that's why space to do and space to not do is important. Like you might go for a walk after that and say, wow, it just came to me. I wish I would have had that wisdom like 5 minutes ago.
I want to dive a little bit more into roles because this has been something that um, has been really fascinating to me. And I like how you actually label them as their superheroes, right? Not just your parts of your identity. And I had this visual in my mind. It's like, here's that cape, here's that emblem for that. But before we do that, you said something I think that in passing, but I'd like to double click on it a little bit more. You said it's the creating this bubble of love. Do you feel that this whole thing doing to done in the questions, the roles, the practicing is love in action?
Absolutely. Going back to the purpose of doing to done, clarity is kind. You could say clarity is loving, and in clarity, um, we gain higher level to tactical level perspective on what is the best and perfect move I can make next. Make it with kindness, that some of them will work, some of them won't. But that's not only true for me as an individual, but it's true for us as a collective. Nobody in this world is walking through this world perfect. So we just as we build that empathy for ourselves, we start to build empathy for others, and then we start to build the wisdom that, you know what? It's all improv. We're all making it up as we go. So let's have some fun with it. Let's be a little lighthearted with it. So that's why, like, the whole design of the book is hopefully creates that energy vibe. Fun, kind, find your wisdom, deploy it with the best of your ability so that you can suffer less, have more joy, and those around you can do the same. So that's how I hold it. And these roles, like this is the key unlock in doing to done is once you see yourself in these superhero roles and you're driving home from work, you park the car. So work you is in the car, and then you see the garage door and you're going to walk through it. And then, dad and husband, you have to show up on the other side. So it's moments and role transitions like that when you're really mindful that, man, the last thing they need is work dad in there. What they need in there is somebody coming through with good questions, high fives, hugs, recognizing I had a good day or I had a bad day. And how can I be there for the humans on the other side of that door? So, like one of the key practices in my dad role was dinner at the table. So I don't know if you ever thought of dinner as a table as a practice, but how am I at the table? What's my presence? What kind of questions do I come with? Am I listening? Am I, thankful? Am I, all these things that you want to practice in that practice. So that's where that's how we hook the system together to create a trusted system that works for your life, not just work, but all the different areas of life. And we typically hop through these areas through the gate of our roles. And that's a key unlock.
Well, I'm curious. You said first have empathy for yourself, sort of like the idea you're on a plane, put your oxygen mask on first before you decide to help others, then have empathy for others. And I'm curious how you identifying the roles that and the capes the superhero like personas that you have in your life helped you have empathy, and what keeps people from having empathy on the roles? Because it seems to me that so often most people don't truly, sure, they go, "Yep, I'm a parent, I'm a sibling, I'm a friend," right? But that just seems kind of squidgy in image, right? But what keeps them from having the clarity? But then what more importantly, what keeps them from having the empathy for themselves in all of these superhero roles?
Well, there's, first of all, in naming the roles, in naming things that are on your mind and actually attaching names to roles is interesting because when you write something down at all these different levels, it's an act of courage to actually be clear on the different roles that you hold. So I would say number one, naming them is really important. And then number two, we double click on the name of the role and say, why does this even exist? What's the purpose of this role? And if I were to draw a picture, what would the picture of success look like for this role? So now I'm marrying the kind of like the poetic essence of the role, the purpose, with a visual. I literally have people just draw a little stick figure. What does the hero look like? So I've got the left and right side of the brain working together because as you draw the picture, it draws you into the scene. There's much more information in that picture than you draw, but the act of drawing it pulls all this information forward on what your vision of success looks like. And so you have that for each of these roles. And some of these roles are more enduring than others. For example, the role of self is what I call an anchor role. You're in every you are the hero of this story and everybody else is just an actor, right? In your story. So you have self and then you have some roles that you occupy as you move through life. So and these change, you got, you know, um, son, daughter, husband, father, family, friends, business one, business two, business three, work, kind of stuff. So some of these will come in and out of life. Like you used to be a student in high school, and no longer, used to be a single dude, no longer, and so these roles change with time. And one of the interesting things that I've noticed, and this is, I would say, with all the people that I coach, about a third of the women that I coach have a harder time defining the purpose and vision of success for their self role, for their anchor role. And the reason is they've been giving so much of themselves in all the other roles that the practice of reclaiming some time just for themselves it got lost along the way. So it's a rediscovery moment for some that, wow, I I need to reinvest in myself again because I've noticed there's a cost of not doing that to my health, to my mental well-being, to my aspirations, whatever, because I've been giving it to my kids and my husband or my partner or whatever. So these roles allow us to name these things, and naming these things is an act of courage. And then when I work with clients and we want to go a layer deeper, I have this thing called role clarity digging deeper map. So I can go by each role. Are there any problems we need to surface? Any creative opportunities or any courageous acts you need to do in this role? And we do that role by role. So now we're going and mining deeper into your psyche, into your consciousness to figure out what's going on and name the things that need to be named so we can clarify them and determine what you want to do about them. So it's this downloading, decoding, and recoding cycle that's going on and doing to done. So we get level one, Then we help you get to level 2, level 3 understanding, so on and so forth. And it all just happens through this very simple framework that has some well-placed questions, but these questions, as you practice them, help you notice. Then you were then you now notice what you're, waiting to notice that was behind that thing. So, it's kind of a fun journey.
Yeah, it sounds, and that's pretty incredible 'cause, I'm surrounded by some pretty incredible, uh, like, amazing, powerful, like, women, and I'm curious, and I'm sure that happens a lot with women, but I think when you look at people in general as givers, how do they how do they reclaim some of that? How do they like, what's the recipe for people if they feel who are listening to this and they go, "Man, when you said that, I raised my hand, like, that's me, like, that's me." Like, how do you reclaim?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is recognition. So I had one client, her name was Gina. She was a very successful, pediatric, doctor, and then she left that profession for a period of time to homeschool her 2 boys. And then I caught her when her boys are getting ready to graduate from, um, high school, and the homeschooling was no longer gonna be needed, so it kind of raised an existential moment, like, "Who am I now?" Like, I'm a well-educated doctor who's been out of it for many years. I've been a homeschool mom, and what is my next step? So in that situation, we went right back to the anchor role. That's where we discovered an underinvestment. So instead of like naming her role me, she named her role, "This is Gina!" Exclamation point. And what she was doing there was she was reclaiming herself. The exclamation point was the energy I want to explore and reinvest in discovering myself again at this phase in life, right? What does this phase in life have to offer for me? How do I take care of myself? And then, secondly, often when people are in transition, I have them create a new role called the next me. And in this new role, they can start exploring what is the purpose of the next me? What's your vision of success? I can ask questions like, what are you optimizing for in this next journey? Money, time, freedom, scheduling flexibility. What is it? And then we can start exploring things to really kind of rough in the next me. And then in Gina's case, we actually grabbed some personas of what she wanted to do because she wanted to do some product design because she has some very good ideas about adolescent athletes and the kind of like the ankle braces and stuff. Everything was beige and black. She's like, there can be a whole new world of fun stuff for teenagers to wear instead of the beige and black that's in the marketplace. So she was wondering, how do I become a product designer? So we just wrote in a role of product designer. And then the question becomes, go out and interview some product designers. What's their purpose? What's their vision? What kind of things do they practice as they do this role of product design? Name the practices. Which practices matter most? So you get kind of a template uh, to consider as you try to see if you want to move into that space. So it's kind of like wearing a Halloween costume. You get to cosplay for a little bit with that role without doing the full investment, or you did enough thinking about it to say, okay, I still feel attracted to that. So that's how it starts. It's you reclaim your space, and then as you imagine what's next in this next period of time that you're pursuing, I call that fresh start territory. What do you want to do in this next period of time? It's a beautiful question, and it's an invitation. And the only limitation largely is your imagination. But even your imagination sometimes has to work within a beautiful constraint that you've been given. So that's okay. You can still use your imagination within that beautiful constraint to make a step forward someplace towards something. And in the book, I have this picture called the party in the brain. And these are all the thoughts that we're having. And I drew that picture so that you could see you have all these thoughts, but you are not your thoughts. A little separation. And then there's a hand in that picture that's waving, and it's speaking in a whisper, and it's so loud in the party in the brain you can't hear it because that hand waving is your internal wisdom whispering to you. But it can't hear you because you have so much stuff on your mind that you can't hear the whisper of your own wisdom. So that's why we get all this stuff out of your brain so you can start to hear the wisdom speaking to you. And that goes back to downloading, decoding, recoding so you can see it. Let's downcode, recode, and or download, uncode, and recode again. It's a cycle. And it's not hard. Maybe I'm making it sound complex, but it's not that complex. It's just a practice over time, like shooting one shot at a time. The more you revisit this stuff, the more you know yourself. The more you know yourself, then you can make strategic decisions for yourself as you move into the future.
So many things from that. Number one is that I love you laid out there. It is literally just as simple as you going, roll, product designer, just boom. It's just, and all of a sudden, from what wasn't, I mean, she didn't have any background. All of a sudden, she just was on paper and be able to explore it. And I think the other thing, so I find that just so fascinating that anyone who's listening can literally, in a blink of an eye, and by the way, free, completely free. You don't have to invest anything. You just literally just go, you want it because you want it. But I think the follow on that I thought was so profound is you said, like, who am I now? And I distinctly remember having this after my son died, and my team had, I mean, my incredible team, they sprung into action and totally self-managing, self-multiplying like company came back to the fact that like 70% of my relationships had been in my OG company, my six companies, and they've been handled right. They had been transferred over to create that space, and and most entrepreneurs are listening, be like, well, that's amazing. You just you just created like so much space, but I distinctly remember having this feeling, if not this, then what? Right? Like, if not for them, who am I? And I'm curious with so many people when you look at these roles, like for example, I think that this happens often like with moms, right? Kids graduate and you said something really profound. You go, and it had run its course. It was no longer like needed. And how much of the floundering in a role and needing to ask that question comes from the death of applause?
Yeah, there's at the beginning of the book, I have people do something called a life map where you can do this on a piece of paper, 0 to 100. Let's call that your life. You draw a vertical line and then you draw the name current me. So this is the current you on this journey towards 100. And then to the left side of that is the past you. To the right side of that is the future you. And the past you is fixed, but stories and the stories are fixed, the experiences you had are fixed, all that kind of stuff. But the meaning you can make from the past you is not fixed. So you can draw bigger circles of understanding around it as you go, as you move through time and you get more mature and you understand life a little better. Those past experiences inform your future experiences. So the past you is fixed, but the meaning you can make from it is not, and the understanding you can get from it is not. So, so we're always moving towards the future you. Now, there's a second map that I bring people through. It's called the Life Map 20-year view. And you can do this on a piece of paper too. You draw your name at the top, write down the names of people important to you, right next to them, put their ages, and then age everybody out in 5-year chunks for the next 20 years. So you'll start to see, your family, your pets, your your parents, the grandparents, and everybody's kinda aging out on their own 100-year journey, and each of those phases is a season of life. So I could see, like in Gina's story, a season of life ending and then a new one beginning, and by seeing it in 5-year chunks, it really starts, um, raising bigger questions. Like, with all that activity gone, what's gonna happen in that void when the boys are no longer here? What do I do for myself? What do I do in my relationship with my, partner? What do I where are my parents? Are they aging? Do they need care? What season am I going to be in? So that map has been a profound one for people to complete to get a good view of what's happening in life. And I remember I did that for myself, and and I noticed my mom, whose health wasn't great, she probably didn't have many years left. And it actually changed the way I said goodbye to my mom. So I'd go over and I'd visit my mom and dad and I'd say, I love you. I'll see you soon. Because when I came up with that question or that statement on how I want to say goodbye to my mom, in my heart, it was an eternal journey. So the day came when my brother-in-law said, I was out on a business trip. Mom's not doing well. She's in the hospital. You got to get home. So I'm flying, driving down, getting in LAX airport. I'm on a shuttle on the way to go home. Then I get the call. You got to say goodbye to mom. I'm on a rental shuttle bus and I have to say goodbye to my mom. So I tell her I love her. And I said, I love you. I'll see you soon, because I was playing the long eternal game. So in my heart, I was like, okay, all right, this game is still going, hasn't ended. This part of it has ended. Hung up, bawled my eyes out. It's like the people on the bus probably thought I was crazy. And then, but you know, I already practiced closure with my mom so many times, and she didn't even know it just by saying, "I love you. I'll see you soon." And so that's how these maps can bring you up to a level of perspective that might help you see a situation differently with another person that's important to you in your life or something, and change what's changeable during this season versus letting it slip by, because it's like hotel rooms. If you don't, occupy this day, it's gone. It's the same life map. I did it with construction executives. This big 6'6" guy realized he only had 4 years left with his daughter before she left for college, and he's like, "Wow, this is gonna change how I go home at night." So, beautiful frameworks, beautiful questions to help you find what wisdom you need to deploy so you can live into the purpose and vision of the roles you're holding in your life. That's what this that's what this framework helps you do. It helps you get really clear on that.
I'm thinking about like in health. Obviously, there's a theme here for me. They always say like, every 90 days, doing like a 1 to 3 day fast, right? Because it allows the cell autophagy. I think I'm saying that correctly. How often with your roles should you be reevaluating them? And because I'm sure that there were roles that served you during different time periods, and then maybe there's ones that, in terms of, even though you have evolved and you've added new superhero identities to your roles, that there are some that are still there. Like how often should we be having this role mapping and role conversation with ourselves?
Yeah. The role mapping activity and the physical map of the roles, as often I'm gonna give you 2 answers. They're kinda like vague, but I'm gonna then go to specifics. So we do an activity where you map out your roles. So review that as frequently as you need to just feel the juice and feel the love from your roles and see yourself as a superhero. However frequently you need to look at that, look at that. And I'll give you some examples soon. Second, when you're in a transition, that's when you pull the map back out and you review your roles. So let's say, I just was meeting with a friend yesterday who is transitioning um, out of work because of, org restructure and now needs to find a new job. So there's a transition going on. So that person has a role called the next me, and they have to go on that journey to figure out what that is. And then they're also deleting some old roles that they held in this last job. So freeing up all kinds of energy. The question is, how am I going to spend my energy during this next period of time? So that's one example. Another example is you move through life, you might be in a relationship and then you might not be in a relationship anymore through divorce or whatever it is. So then there is a transition there. So I had this, one, beautiful human in my journey who, during the course of her life was married, divorced, married, divorced. So um, she had these relationships where she was a stepmom officially for a period of time, and then she was not a stepmom, but she still had a human that she was in a relationship with. So as part of her role clarity, she had to figure out and then go to that person and say, what do we want our relationship to be going forward? So I can be clear on that and support you, serve you, and or not, depending on what you want here. So it gets down to that level of conversation with oneself based on their context, their history, and how's that pulling on you from these different roles I need to hold. And it's a beautiful thing to witness people do that. But largely it's during routine maintenance of your roles. And then you might be tweaking practices and projects that are important to you. And then bigger transitions where it's like, man, I'm plugging roles in and plugging roles out at an individual level. I'll even set aside how you can use a role clarity map to do, team structures and business structure stuff with it and that kind of stuff because it can be used on that front as well. So visit it as often as you need, and certainly during transitions.
In the ones where you're interacting with others, do you I mean, is it do you are you encouraging of the person to ask the person in their relationship, "Hey, how can I best show up? How can I best serve? How can I best support you in my role as, say, dad, husband, friend, coworker, peer?" I mean,
Yeah. I mean, that what you just said there is a beautiful question. And it's actually one I asked my daughter when she was 26. I asked her, what kind of dad do you need me to be today? Because you're not the same dad, you don't have the same needs when you were in high school. You're young adult, you know, early in your career, living independently. What kind of dad do I need to be today to serve you? And then go back and update my frame on my dad role. So one of the key practices that came out of that was let's do, son daughter adventures together. So with my son, I actively look for ways we do open water swimming together. So we do open water swimming events together. And that's kind of our thing. And for my daughter, we do anything Taylor Swift together. So we'll follow Taylor Swift to the ends of the earth. So we went to the Reputation tour, to the Eras tour. We got a new album coming out. We are giddy about this new album. We'll dissect it. We'll talk about it. But what we're doing though is we're engaging at a new level of creativity and discovery about a space that's important to us. So that's really where the magic is. How do I co-create some magic with this person? and create some memories along the way that will be of service to them and to me and do some good in the world, whatever that is.
That's beautiful. How to co-create the magic. Um, when you think about the roles, right? And I'm going to bring it back to what we're talking about is knowing the not just the right question, but the appropriate question to ask. And the difficulty I think people have in knowing to ask the question, right? You might be able to go like, okay, first question, if you're talking about your role as a parent, if you're mom or dad, what does it look like to be, the best version of, for your kids? And again, I have a almost 17-year-old, 4-year-old, and 7.5-week-old, right? So that that's three different questions, right? For three different sort of roles within my role as a dad. But what are the three sort of 3 to 5 questions that you go, "Hey, if you just start with this is going to allow you to really be able to get the umami out of the role, at least as you think about your superhero and start to build that persona," right? Do you have a cape? Don't you have a cape? Do you have boots? Don't you have boots, right? Emblem, no emblem, right? So, what are those 3 to 5 questions that you would say, regardless of what role that is, that these will serve you in a way, at least getting you sort of that starter pack of exploring questions about the roles?
Yeah. You can even remove the role frame from some of these things. Like I think one of the most powerful questions is, what's the next action? What do you think we should do here? Ask ask your 17-year-old, all the way down to the younger children. And that's fun because then you're teaching them the act of, you'll see them go, huh? And then they'll have to look up and give you an answer. But that's exactly what you're looking for because that is thinking. Like, what is the next action? And then I think, for working with kids, I think part of the thing we have to remember as adults is accepting imperfect answers because we transact in thousands of these transactions and they might be doing the first one. It might be clunky as heck, but it's their internal wisdom. It's what's available to them. And if it's safe enough to go out and try, go try it and then come on back. Let's talk about it. Certainly would prevent anything that would cause harm or anything like that. Give a little more guidance. So there's that one. And then just from one of the things that stuck with me and my kids, which is a super breakthrough question, is, what's your vision of success for fill in the blank for the summer, for the school year, for this project you got to work on, for this interview that you're being interviewed for. Um, my kids and I joke that is like the superpower question. So whenever they did their first interviews, they'd go in and um, you know they would ask, or at the end of the interview, or the part of the interview where somebody would say, "Well, do you have any questions?" And then they would say, "What is your vision of wild success for this position?" And the interviewers would be like, "Wow, that is a crazy question. I've never had that question before." So, and so they found the superpower in a super question. So I would just play with those 2 questions alone. What's the next action? And what's your vision of wild success for fill in the blank? And you can, of course, adjust the language as appropriate, but those are 2, one's an unlock at the tactical level, one's an unlock at a more higher level perspective level. Like, what are we actually trying to move towards?
So, when we get done with the questions, this is the part that I think is, in my mind, is the next hard part, right? Obviously, you ask the question, what's the next action? But when we think about practice, and I'm go to your example of the free throws, right? Pretty simple. Grab the ball, go out, there's a line, and then you just maybe there's some warm up you do, right? But when you think about our roles, how do we think about the practicing of it? Is it literally down to the date you fill out one of these focus beat cards and you go, roll as a dad? hey, what are the things like what are the top 3 projects, what are the top 5 actions I can do that day? I mean, is that as simple as a practice? But how do we think about practicing these roles so that we get lucky, so to speak, our preparation meets the opportunity to show up as the superhero?
Yeah, I would say there's living into a role, just to be, the semantics here might be important. Like living into a role, the context of a role, the spirit of the role, the purpose and vision of the role is one level. And then I preserve practice for a very specific thing I need to do to practice at a frequency that helps me keep this role alive and vibrant and moving forward. So practices help you go deeper and put you on a path of mastery. Projects help you go from doing to done. So projects have a finish line. Practices are never done. They help you go deeper and deeper, deepen your understanding. So the act of naming a practice is the act of discernment. So I'm putting a beautiful constraint on you by saying, for this role of fill in the blank role, what are the 3 most important things for you to work on that deliver a majority of the value for this role? And if you can name those 3 things, then that's a good start because you've named what's really important. And then what's left is to choose how you want to do those things. Some people need to time block them. It really depends. Like I've seen situations where calendars are in a multi-share environment and they need to time block stuff that's not available for others to schedule over. Okay. Time block your practices if that's your context and you need to do that. Others can use simple behavior prompts that shoes in front of the door, my feet go in the shoes, and I'm out for a walk. So now I'm practicing walking. I don't have to time block it. I'm not that level of calendaring need. I just need behavioral prompts in my environment to do the practice and everything in between. So it's whatever puts you in these practices. Some of them can be scheduled. Some of them might be what I call when then practices. So when a situation shows up, then I'm going to practice this. So let's go back to our example about having a conversation with our spouse. And let's even go back to the conversation of the 5 whys. Like there is an art to having constructive disagreements with a spouse. There are frameworks you can use. And if you both agree to use the same framework, then the quality of the conversation can go higher. But A, do you know that framework exists? B, do you both agree to practice it? And C, are you practicing it as a practice? If yes, then you'll be able to reap the fruits of that practice. So practices can be held loosely or they can be like, very specific. Like this is the very specific thing I'm going to put on my grocery list because my micronutrients need to be right at this level, right down to the grams. So it depends on how you want to hold it. But there's flexibility enough to hold it at the level of detail you want. The key thing is to name it. Then you can figure out the sub-level details about calendaring and frequency and how am I doing and that kind of stuff. And then you can review that as part of your role review once a week, once a month, once a quarter. How am I doing with these practices?
One of the things you talked about earlier in our conversation was creating clarity in not only that, but creating space in your mind. The download, decode, recode. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of having that space in your brain? I mean, some of my favorite books, like The Comfort Crisis, he talks about, one of the biggest precursors to creativity is boredom. And I was just reading The Science of Scaling, and one of the things to talk about Parkinson's law, right? Like you will use as much time as you allocate to get the same like job done, right? It will fill the space that you give it. So obviously space is really important, and the most important real estate isn't the one that we pay a mortgage to, right? It's the one be the 6 inches between our ears. Can you talk about how impactful and how do people create space in their brain?
So so we need to orient this conversation over time. So we're humans walking through our journey in life, and some days, some hours, days, weeks, months are busier than others. So that's the context produces content that needs our attention. Context that we're in produces content that needs our attention. So some days we will have a lot of stuff on our minds. Some days we may have less stuff on our minds. Or if we haven't had a practice to empty our minds, we might have a lot of backlog on our mind. Old stories we keep telling ourselves that aren't serving us anymore, you know, beliefs, all that kind of stuff. So the practice in doing to done is something called a brain sweep, where you spend 5 minutes just writing down what's on your mind. And that brain sweep is actually an act of relief, release, courage, and creativity all wrapped into one because you're naming what has your attention. You're actually giving it a name and not leaving it in this ambiguous space. And then that sets you up for the other side of the doing to done map, which is, determining of those things, is there anything actionable? If yes, what's doing look like? What's done look like? But the act of doing this brain sweep day in and or frequently, I'll just use day in and day out for 5 minutes, helps you download and decode and recode and put it in your system that you review. So it's this cycle of reviewing of what you're noticing that helps the brain relax because now it has a game it's going to play. It knows how to play it and it knows where the pieces go. It's just like in your kitchen, you pull open your silverware drawer, you're not confused on where the forks, knives, and spoons are because they all have a category and your brain loves categories. So this thing called the brain sweep is saying, I'm just going to see what's there. Some days it's going to be a lot, some days it might be little. Brain sweep number 1 is going to or brain sweep number 100 is going to feel different than brain sweep number 1 because of the path of mastery you'll go on as you're noticing what's happening in your brain. And then you can't just leave the brain sweep out there. We have to determine what doing and done looks like. And that becomes the foundation of the agreements you've made with yourself and others. So we ask a question. I call it the heroic question. Is that thing on your brain sweep actionable? And whatever you say yes to changes what's going to appear in your fresh start territory, you going forward, your future self. So So downloading this stuff. So that's why we have the party in the brain. And then there's a corresponding image in the book called the calm brain, where there's no party. It's just like a yogi sitting on top of a mountain with presence. So going back to the choice on a Saturday, I choose to be in a dad role. I choose to be present in my dad role and be dynamic in what the need is on this Saturday as we go to T-ball and, things are, happening or whatever the situation may be. So the importance of the brain sweep is just continue clearing. And then the ultimate thing it becomes is a tool for noticing what you're noticing. So you can notice what you want to do about what you're noticing. It's a means to an end. We never hang on to it. It actually gets discarded as you determine and ask that heroic question, is this actual yes or no? If yes, turn it into doing and done statements, and then we've got that in our system.
I love that you put these things into these hero because who doesn't want to be a superhero? And more importantly, you don't need I mean, truly, I was talking about capes and emblems, but you don't need a cape or an emblem. And, so often we wanna be a hero when we show up in our professional lives, but so often that doesn't necessarily make it over into, our personal lives.
Well, the brain sweep too is actually a tool that I use to say, what role does this belong to? And it's a way to back into your roles. So you don't always have to start with naming your roles. You can let your brain sweep self-identify, what role is this belonging to? Oh, that's a mom role. Oh, what's this one? Oh, that's an entrepreneur role. Oh, what's this one? That's, me being a marketer role. So you can back into them that way. And sometimes stuff is landing on your list for a role that you don't hold. So there you have to say, is this mine to own or is this somebody else's stuff to own?
Ooh, powerful.
You, right? So now we're getting into boundaries, particularly in work,
Yeah.
but also in personal life too, depending on the agreements you've made with others. And so that's really powerful and helpful. Or it's something new that's emerging that might be a new role you need to hold. Like, I think a lot of people these days are trying to figure out, what's my relationship with AI? So they might have an emerging role called, you know, AI something or other.
You talked about boundaries, and which I love, right? We have all these identities, but you also said, like, it's so important that you have empathy with yourself first. So how do you, like, on your cards where you put the role, how do you, when I think of an asset allocation of your time and energy, how often are you do you recommend people their role is just to be about serving and supporting yourself?
Well, the time allocation to the roles is really an individual call based on the 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 context that you're in as you go through this journey in life. So the question that why we have roles is so you can ask the question, do I feel appropriately engaged with all the roles in my life? And then you answer that question. Yes, no, and then if no, what do I need to do to feel more in balance with this role? Is it name a project that's missing and just define the next action? That could be it. Is it like in the self role, I need to, find 30 more minutes in my day to do a workout of some sort? Then you renegotiate that agreement and then the artifact is your entry on your calendar. Um, it can manifest in a lot of different ways, but the key question that we're driving towards by naming the role is, do I feel appropriately engaged with my life? Do I feel appropriately engaged with all these different roles that I have in my life? And then let the answers guide the tactics.
What a great question. What a it's a good energy question, and my guess is that as you're doing that, Mike, it's okay to not have the answer. Like, am I appropriately engaged in all of them, right? Like, that's what I'm taking from today. It's like, and if you don't have the answer, maybe you just need to create the space to allow it to that I think you said in the beginning, these, like, unknown creatives that might pop up into your brain.
Yeah, so it's okay to not to know the answer, and in those situations, you know, the question that I ask myself and the people that I coach is, how do you move from not knowing to knowing? What's the next action to know a little better?
There's so many things that are, like, so profound, and even as we're talking, I'm having some clarity because of these simple constructs and questions that you're talking about that, I'm going, I've had a couple clarity moments as we're talking, that I'm going, I need to have, like, what's that first action that I can take? What's and it's pretty profound.
It may sound complicated, but it's not that complicated. A life map, and there are 3 maps in the system
Mm.
that help you, maybe create a productivity system of some sort so that you can daily just, write down what are your 3 projects and actions that you need for today. So this is your life. This is it decoded. This is it coded in technology if you want to do something like that. And this is the daily choice that you make. So it's not that complicated once you get the game set up. It's a system, and systems have smaller games within them. And once you know the game, it's a closed loop system too. So it's got a place for everything. If something doesn't have a place, then it pops up a question. Why is this in the system? Should this be in my system? But I think I remember one of your questions, which was boundaries. And and there are two ways that well, the thing that's going to force your pushing on boundaries is answering the heroic question, is this actionable? Yes or no? And as you think about that, there's two things. One, your roles that you've created for yourself help you understand what's in scope for your life and what's out of scope for your life. So the more you're aware of your roles, the more you might say, yes, this belongs in the system, or no, this is, I'm going to decline this opportunity because it's not aligned. And you might even say your past behavior was to say yes to everything, but now you're starting to say, no, I don't want to spend energy on that because I need to spend energy on these other things. So there's that dynamic going on, which is served by clear role definition. Number two is the serenity prayer. You know, having the wisdom to know what's in your control, know what's out of your control, and to know the difference. So there are some things that we worry about that are largely out of our control. So just let them go and go back to what's in your control and make action on that. And then also just, since we're in this world of digital solutions, which can lead to digital overwhelm sometimes, that is another reason why I created the clarity cards. The focus being the reset beat is to get out of the digital solutions to create your daily focus. Because if you have to keep going back into the jungle, you're going to get attacked. But if you have an analog, you had to scribe it, and that impacted your nervous system. You reiterated an outcome that's important to you, so you're reinforcing. And then the way it's designed, it can stand up on your desk. So that becomes the beacon of what to do, not some notification on your system. So it's actually helping people avoid doom scrolling and also have a deeper relationship with their projects, which are their intentions and the agreements that they made. And people are finding that it's really profound to go back to just some simple handwritten sentences in a beautifully constrained way. So it's not an unlimited list. There's only 3 and 5 actions. And it's really serving a need for some folks.
It's so true, by the way. Like you can have like technology is amazing, AI is amazing, and for those of you who are listening going, I'm not really good. I have a lot of really good, poorly worded questions as statements. AI can help you be able to go, what actually is the statement or the question in here? And so if you want to help shortcut that at least, but the thing that I think is so true about you're also creating a diary of agreements. You said the word agreements, and I think that there has been this line that's crossed that we no longer either appreciate, respect, or honor agreements that we have for ourselves. And it is the basis, I think, of like the human beingness is this if we can't honor the things we agree that we've agreed to for ourselves, like it flows through to our kids see it. Not only that, but our peers, our collaborators, the clients that we do stuff with. And I mean, it's the basis of integrity.
Absolutely. And the fun part is you get to see your small journeys along the way. Like here is like once you complete something, here's June. So I can go back to June and say, here are all the small wins I made along the way. So it's almost like having a journal without the pressure of having a journal, and the commitment's so low. It's like one line, "What's a small win I had? What's something I'm grateful for? What's something I learned?" And then you look at that body of work over a month, you're like, "That small win belongs in the small win hall of fame because I sent that email, that person got back to me, I got the job," whatever it is.
For those who are listening, if they want to go like, wow, okay, like, do I have to sign up for like this big thing to have access to some of these tools? Can you talk a little bit about some of the tools, where they can find them, where they can find your book, but this clarity collection, and some of these other services that you offer for people who go, okay, ooh, I love these tools, but I really want to even dive even deeper into it. Can you walk through for the audience, like where they can find these things, and if they want more, even deeper dive into this, where they can go?
Yeah. So if you go to my website, which is doing2done.com, TODONE.com, that's where everything lives. So, one, you can get the book there, easy peasy. But two, if you go to, there's a section on the website that says webinar, and that's a free webinar you can take to understand the idea of downloading and turning things into doing and done statements. So you can see what that looks like. Some people, it's actually interesting. I launched a clarity collection in February, and some people start their doing to done journey with a clarity collection. So on the website, there's a section called the clarity collection, and you can go there and get a bird's eye view of the cards and what we're talking about here. The third thing is, if you're interested in coaching, I have coaching services that are there. If you're in a corporate environment and you want a license doing to done for your team, your staff, your company, there's options there. And then right now, I'm in the pilot phase of launching a community called the Clarity Collective. It's not up on the website, but within probably 30 or 60 days, it'll be up there. And that's a community of people coming together to move through these practices together, to have office time together, to have social time together, just to talk about work and life and managing the complexities that we're managing in a community environment where community members support each other. So that's coming and will definitely be launched in the fall. Um, and I think those are the key things.
Yeah, and if people want to follow you on your socials, do you mind kind of sharing them, what they are, where they can find you?
So on Instagram, I am ask Mike Williams, all one word. And on Facebook, I'm Ask Mike Williams. And then on um, LinkedIn, Ask Mike Williams. Most active on Instagram and LinkedIn with respect to posting. The Facebook account for Ask Mike Williams has a lot of really good information about the products that I offer. So that's always rolling. And then through any of these things, if anybody wants to reach out and have a virtual coffee, um, always willing to connect with folks and answer any questions that you might have. So if you go to the Doing to Done site, there's a form you can fill out to say, hello, Doing to Done, and just request a virtual meeting and I'll set something up with you.
That's fantastic. Mike, thank you so much for being on here. I mean, this was deeply fascinating because I think someone can see doing to done as like GSD, but no, actually the doing to done is moving from a world of productivity to actually being an incredibly productive human being, and how you show up. And I thought today was just an absolute masterclass. And thank you for sharing so generously, so many good constructs, so many great questions, so many good structures that I think the audience is going to walk away with.
I just want to say thank you too. And thanks for creating the space. Thanks for taking all the actions that you take to create this service for your listeners. It's a great service. So I appreciate you as the human, living the creative life and putting it out there in the universe. So that's wonderful, and I'm grateful for you.
Well, the feeling is mutual. And thank you, Mike. Thank you for those kind words. Before we go, Uh, as you know, I like to have our guests leave the last ripple, the last phrase, and maybe in your case, maybe the last question. But what is the thing that you want our audience to be thinking about as they leave this episode?
Create small wins, and those small wins will have big impacts.
Melvin, Mike, thanks for being here. Thanks for the generous shares, and looking forward to hearing the feedback from our audience.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max Life.